And thank you to everyone for joining us for tonight's webinar. What does an effectively differentiated classroom look like? It's part of NAGC's Spring 2013 series on planting and growing differentiation in the classroom. I'm Lori Seelig, a member of the Education Committee and the Director of Advanced Academics for Eagle, Colorado, in beautiful, beautiful Rocky Mountains. Every WOW is recorded, and after the series has ended, it's accessible in our live learning center. To access the archive directly after this webinar, simply use the same link and password you used to access tonight's webinar. And we are so sorry for the technical difficulties that we had, but now it sounds like everything's up and going. So if you're having trouble listening to the presentation over the Internet or through your computer speakers, you can access this audio by phone. The number and the passcode are in the chat box, as well as your email confirmation. We highly encourage you to take this opportunity to ask questions via the chat box. You may submit questions to our presenters or to any other attendees at any time, and we will aim to address them during the presentation, as well as a designated Q&A at the end of the presentation. Be sure to click on the Send button to send your message. The handout materials and the additional resources are located in the links box to the left of the slides. To access the materials, simply click on the link and a separate web browser will open. Be sure to view the Differentiation book flyer to take advantage of the 25% discount. Also, for those of you who like to tweet while listening, you can click on the Twitter link in the social media box. Facebook is also available. Another member of the Education Committee is tweeting tonight, so please join her. And now I'm delighted to introduce our presenters. Julia Link Roberts is the Mahurin Professor of Gifted Studies and the Executive Director of the Center for Gifted Studies and the Carol Martin Gatton Academy of Mathematics and Science in Kentucky. Dr. Roberts directs summer and Saturday programs for children and young people who are gifted and talented, and she teaches graduate courses in gifted education. Tracy Ford Inman is the Associate Director of the Center for Gifted Studies at Western Kentucky University. Tracy has presented on the state, national, and international levels, trained hundreds of teachers in differentiation and gifted education, has published multiple articles, and serves as a writer-editor for The Challenge, the award-winning news magazine for the Center for Gifted Studies. Julia and Tracy's new book on differentiation, The Teacher Survival Guide, Differentiating Instruction in the Elementary Classroom, is available at a discount to the Spring 2013 WOW attendees. The flyer is used to purchase the book as it is in the links box. Julia and Tracy, the audience is all yours.
Well, welcome. We are very happy to be here, and we think our topic is one that is worthy of talking about, and that is, what does an effectively differentiated classroom look like? And we want to start out by asking you to let us know which of these statements applies to you right now. So check out those statements and let us kind of have a sense of who's in the audience. It's fun to see you clicking on. It looks very much like we would have anticipated. Some of you are quite experienced differentiating. Some of you do it some of the time, and it certainly is okay that someone's on to learn about differentiation from the very starting block. So let's begin. A question that we all need to consider is, when is it best to set the climate and culture in a classroom? Well, undoubtedly, we need to do that whenever we're getting ready to differentiate, but the early part of the year is when it's most advantageous, because if you really want a differentiated classroom, you probably start setting that climate and establishing the culture for differentiation day one as you start your school year. Wouldn't you say that's true, Tracy?
I totally agree. It has to be deliberate and intentional, and we're going to spend quite a bit of time tonight helping you establish that environment. We're going to start with the standards, though, and by the way, this is one of the links that you have, and out of the standards, one focuses specifically on learning environments. Learning environments foster personal and social responsibility, multicultural competence, and interpersonal and technical communication skills for leadership in the 21st century to ensure specific student outcomes.
And of course, one of the really big assets of these programming standards is that they are stated in terms of what the student will be able to do, the student outcomes. And you can look at this one example. There are several, and this is the only one we'll use. But it's looking at growth in personal competence and dispositions for exceptional academic and creative productivity. And these include, and you can see the various aspects that are included there.
You can see some of the evidence-based practices here, and again, we're not going to read all these out loud to you, but look, for example, just at the first one, 4.1.1. Educators maintain high expectations for all students with gifts and talents as evidenced in meaningful and challenging activities. And we're going to talk about how you can establish that environment so that these meaningful and challenging activities are happening.
We certainly will direct you to the programming standards, and if you use them all the time, I'm sure you're sharing them with other teachers and colleagues with whom you work. It's a wonderful resource for digging deeply into what it is we should be doing for students, and of course it's all about differentiating.
And many of you out there are probably very familiar with the standards, but you might not be as familiar with Danielson's framework for teaching, but also focuses on one of the aspects of classroom environment.
Danielson's work is being used a lot in Kentucky right now, but I think it's being used in other states as well. And what he has done is establish a framework, and one of the key domains focuses in on classroom environment. And I think it's particularly important to use this. This is not out of gifted education. It is highlighting the fact that what we're talking about among colleagues in gifted education is what general educators are also talking about, and it's those partnerships, it's that communication that is incredibly important for us right now, as we want all educators to understand more and more about differentiating for the wide range of learners they have.
I couldn't agree with you more. Now, this is also another link for you, so if this is interesting, you can go here and certainly see a lot more detail than we're going to provide you. We're just going to look at the main categories that are covered in the framework. Creating an environment of respect and rapport, and you can see that deals with interactions among all folks involved in the classroom. Establishing a culture for learning that looks at content, expectations, student pride.
And classroom management. And as we talk tonight about what a differentiated classroom looks like, management is of utmost importance, because if management becomes a problem to teachers, they move off of it and go back to what it was they were doing before. It is incredibly important that we know how to manage instructional groups, that we can make the transitions as smoothly as possible, that we can manage materials and supplies. Otherwise, it becomes too burdensome to have numerous activities going on. And likewise, management in all of these areas is a make or break it situation for the teacher, because you can't stand the high stress of management over a long period of time. You've got to get that under control.
And once you have that under control, if you look at D, managing student behavior, it becomes much more simple once the students understand what their expectations are. And then, of course, physical space is also extremely important in the environment when you're establishing a differentiated classroom. And we'll give you some tips on things to help you make your classroom more effectively organized.
So Danielson provides a framework that other educators may be talking about where you are, or you might share it with them. And it certainly is within the general education literature that's being studied right now.
So let's move on to differentiation. What is it, and what is it not? Let's focus on that what it isn't at first.
What it isn't. Now, that sounds like it ought to just be a question we wouldn't need to ask. And yet, so many of these things are misunderstood as being what differentiation is. So we're going to approach what isn't it. And the very first of those, it's not individualization. Frankly, when I hear people talk about differentiation in a way that would suggest each child has a different lesson plan, I think that's impossible, and it scares teachers to think that might be something that they would be expected to do. It is different plans, but not individual plans.
A second thing that it isn't is a set of strategies, and I know that sounds kind of ironic coming from folks who've written a couple of books dealing with strategies for differentiation. But realize that if you go to a workshop and learn this fantastic strategy and you come back and you try to implement it in your classroom and you have not prepared a culture that's conducive to differentiation, it's not going to work. So when we talk about what differentiation is, you're going to see that it's more than simply strategies.
Hands-on. We hear so much about hands-on activities, but if your hands-on activities, learning experiences are not linked to minds-on, it's a nothing. It would be so much better to have minds-on activities with the hands-on being the option if we really want learning to be ongoing.
It's also not a list of choices. And again, I think this sounds a little ironic because a lot of folks feel like, well, I'm giving student choice, that means there's differentiation. And choice certainly can be motivating for children. But if everybody's having the same set of choices, that's not necessarily differentiation. If I give, for example, 3 choices to students who are gifted in the area I'm teaching, and there are 3 choices that are on the high level of Bloom's, and then I give 3 choices on lower levels of Bloom's for my other students who may be struggling as they're learning the content, that's differentiation. Same thing as if I would give audio learners audio choices and kinesthetic learners kinesthetic choices. They have to be deliberate.
It certainly is not differentiation to give everyone the same assignment and give kids more if they do it quickly.
And Julia, to me, this is one of the problems that a lot of teachers have, and they're very well-meaning, and they just think, okay, the kid's gifted, let's give him an extra paper to write, or we'll give him 5 questions, everybody else has 3 questions. It is certainly not more.
Not to be challenging, and of course, it is not just different, it has to be different with purpose.
This quote comes from Hewitt and Weckstein's work, Differentiations and Expectation, A School Leader's Guide to Building a Culture of Differentiation. And I think it's really important as you look at it. By the way, you have a link on that links to an app that Weckstein has recently created that's a walkthrough for administrators for differentiation. It's pretty interesting to check out. But let's see what they had to say here.
Differentiation isn't a fad. Differentiation isn't a trend. Differentiation isn't an invitation. Differentiation is meeting the needs of our students. Differentiation is doing what is best for our students. Differentiation is an expectation.
It's a philosophy, a way of thinking about teaching and learning. Remember, we said it's not just a set of strategies. It's so much more than that.
Or as Beasley has said, differentiation instruction is a proactively planned, interdependent system marked by a positive community of learners, focused high-quality curriculum, ongoing assessment, flexible instructional arrangements, and respectful tasks. Each of those components is important. Respectful task is something that we've got to all remember. For all children, the task must be respectful.
I think that's a pretty powerful statement that she has, and we could spend probably 30 minutes just talking about each of these phrases and how inherently important it is. And we will refer to these as we go on through tonight. But I do want to point out to you, notice it says Beasley Slide 2. This is a resource that's available to you as you as part of the your registration for the WOW. You can have this entire PowerPoint that she produced. The match is absolutely key.
And that match is the match of the curriculum and learning experiences to learners.
A teacher who differentiates effectively matches content that goes from basic to complex, the level of the thinking process, the sophistication and choice of the product, and or the assessment to the student or cluster of students. So as we go through the rest of the presentation, please realize that we are looking for a match. And you've got to keep that in mind as we are talking about children and continuous progress.
That match is what makes differentiation matter.
It certainly does. So let's look at culture. Is the culture right for differentiation?
And this is both the classroom culture and the school culture.
Mm-hmm.
And it is possible to have a culture within a classroom and not have that culture within the school, but it is so much more of a win-win situation when the whole school is focused with a culture that cultivates learning.
I couldn't agree more. What characteristics do gifted children have that may get in the way of differentiation? And as you're looking at your own classroom, or if you're an administrator, if you're looking at your school, think about those gifted kids. What about them gets in the way of doing things different?
Well, starting out, the kid who only wants an A, that's the most important thing about it, rather than what I'm learning in the class, probably has got to slow down, reconsider, in order to be able to fit into a community of learners in which learning is the focus.
And for some of you who are reading that characteristic, I bet a little face or faces popped into your mind as you're thinking about specific gifted children who have that mentality. Some of these children may also be the ones that need to finish first. They zip through the work as quickly as they can because there's that status in turning it in first.
And high-level work isn't work that you can speed through and learn at the highest level.
Couldn't agree more.
There is also the need to be right the first time you do it. In all honesty, if we're doing learning that is very complex, that requires problem solving, requires higher level thinking, it isn't something that you will always reach quickly and completely the first time you do it.
That challenge is so important, appropriately challenging materials. The other thing that I think really gets in the way is a fixed mindset. Some of you might be familiar with Carol Dweck's work with mindset, but fixed mindset means that kids believe that they're born with a certain capacity, and unfortunately many gifted children feel like they're born with a certain capacity for brightness, and they show that off by getting A's and getting awards, and that's how they feel validated. And that's not the case. Growth mindset is the opposite mindset. And with growth mindset, yes, we're born with a certain capacity, but if you work really hard, then you can accomplish all kinds of things. And so what we need to be focusing on kids is not so much telling them how smart they are, but focusing on, wow, you really worked hard to get to this answer.
Or if you didn't do well on something, have an opportunity to reflect with the child on why they didn't do well. They didn't spend time on it. They didn't concentrate on it, so they can make that connection for the next opportunity they have with a similar learning experience.
But kids who have fixed mindsets, they sure don't appreciate differentiation necessarily. They're
Or
not gonna,
feedback.
It's very true. Then you've got those kids that some gifted children have this intense sense of fairness, that fair is what everybody gets the same work to work on. They have the same amount of time to do it. It's what's fair. It's what is equitable. And so somewhere in there we need to get across to kids that equitable is for each child to get what he or she needs. So there are quite a few characteristics that are just innate in gifted children that can get in the way of differentiation. And likewise, there are some characteristics of educators that get in the way.
one of those that raises its head repeatedly is educators who own the myths about gifted children. And probably the one that we hear the most is don't worry about gifted kids. They're going to make it on their own. And if the educator believes in that, that's not going to be a classroom in which differentiation for kids who are ready to learn at a more complex level and at a faster pace has much of a chance to thrive.
I think you're totally right. I think another myth that we have that's pretty rampant with our educators is that gifted kids look a certain way. They come from middle to upper income. Now, in reality, we know that gifted kids cover the whole spectrum. They're English language learners. They're from poverty. They're from all ethnic and racial backgrounds. We've got to dispel that myth. I mean, there's so many myths that are out there, ranging from gifted kids, if you're gifted in one thing, you're gifted in everything, that gifted kids are good students. If you are going to establish a classroom that is differentiated, you need to know what those myths are. And we've given you links that just says myths, but it takes you to the NAGC website, and there are many things there. One is a PowerPoint that goes through those myths. There's even a video that you can share with parents and kids. And it also refers you to the 2009 fall issue of Gifted Child Quarterly that focuses on those myths.
Lots of information can be found right there on that NAGC website.
Mm-hmm.
So probe that possibility.
Now, those are some things that get in the way of differentiation. But let's focus now on what students' characteristics encourage differentiation.
The fact that children differ certainly should be one of the things that we as educators recognize readily, that they have varied levels of readiness and ability in relation to any topic or content area, that they have varied interest about any concept that we're studying, and they have varied learning profiles. They just are different.
They also have a need for greater complexity and challenge. They're hardwired a little differently from most folks, so they need novel ideas, and pace works into that too, as they're going a little bit faster pace. And those screen for differentiation, because if you've got 30 kids in a classroom, you're going to have quite a few different levels of complexity, of kids ready for different levels of complexity.
And so as there are gifted kids who know the content and are ready for dealing at a deeper level into the knowledge, there may be other students in the classroom who need that basic content in order to ever get to that complexity. So it is that range of need that you have in many classrooms. It is also true that children need idea makers. They need others who are wanting to do learning at the level at which they are. If you are an advanced reader, it's really fun to be with others who love to read, particularly who share an interest in a specific type of reading, a genre. It's great to find others who are interested in science or love math, or, you take whatever example you want to. But children need to be with others who share their interests, at least some of the time.
So as we look at these characteristics, let's think, okay, there's a definite need for it. Now, how do we make that happen? What does a differentiated classroom look like? If you're going to walk through a differentiated classroom, what might you see?
Right away, you probably won't see everyone sitting in neat rows doing the same thing. That's almost a fairy tale that everyone would be ready for the same thing. As you walk through the classroom, it may even look disorganized, or it may seem noisy. Noisy, of course, is a relative term. Are you expecting silence, or are you expecting some level of interaction for students as they talk with each other? And, whatever you consider to be noisy, it probably will not be absolutely quiet. But on closer examination, you'll see that this classroom is really filled with activity that has a strong organizational structure. The teacher is well planned who has an effective differentiated classroom.
Lots of questions abound. How do you get that organization? And just look at this long list of questions. But again, this is so critically important to have a well-run classroom. Go back to those slides that we saw earlier with Framework as we're looking at that organizational structure for an effective classroom.
And Tracy, this has to be thought about before the year starts.
Definitely.
If you're getting your classroom ready to be differentiated.
So how do you organize materials and resources? Well, if it's a differentiated classroom, you're going to have lots of both of those things. So you need to work with some sort of system. And that could be something as simple as color coding. For example, math is yellow. So that means when they turn math homework in, they turn it into the yellow basket. That the math assignments are coming out in the yellow folder. That the math resources are over on the bookshelf that has a yellow backing to it. That the math manipulatives are stored in a yellow basket. Just something so that when they see the color, then they see, okay, that's math.
Organizing resources is also a challenge because we want to have a range of resources in a differentiated classroom, and everyone needs to know where those resources go early on. It is incredibly important to have that plan for where resources go so any child could put them away. It isn't something that becomes your responsibility as the teacher.
I think you're exactly right with that. And you would also perhaps want a system set up for getting and returning those supplies if you've got lots of those materials.
Oh my, yes.
So the key to this is you've got to figure this out beforehand.
And what are different grouping possibilities? Well, they're numerous. Is it to organize by reading groups for your language arts? Is it that you're organizing by interest if you're doing some science, or that could be by readiness as well? Are you using centers and small groups, large groups? You just need a plan, and you also need a plan for how do you transition between various grouping arrangements so that you don't waste time with those transitions.
I think maybe a theater analogy would work here, whereas we look about getting students into groups. You know, when scenes are changed during a play, every single person has a job. I'm going to pick up this prop and take it off. Somebody else is going to take a prop and put it on. They're going to take a piece of furniture and put it where the little tape is. Well, it's the same kind of thing for this. If you have a system laid out for your children, and perhaps you're putting those on charts on the wall, this is what a math group looks like. If we get into triads, this is how the desks need to be. And then practice that with the kids so that when you say, okay, it's math triads, the kids know where they're going to go, where their desk goes, and it's all very smoothly done. And it's done pretty quickly, too.
Well, how do I get multiple learning experiences started at the same time?
It's interesting because I think this has a real simple question, a real simple answer, and that is that you really give very clear directions. You don't stand up in front of the class and give directions for 4 groups as they're still sitting in whole groups. You might give an overview, we're going to get into these groups, and when they go to the groups, there's already printed instructions for them so that they know how to get started. So you might go over directions orally for the whole group as far as what the whole group needs to do, but then each individual group will have individualized instructions. So they're getting started right away. And again, that's something that you're going to practice, that you establish at the beginning of the year so that everybody can get started and do it very smoothly.
How do I know when groups need to change? Your assessment data will tell you that. PreAssessment is one aspect of formative assessment. Ongoing assessment provides you with all that information as to when a child needs to change groups or all the groups need to be changed. Your purpose will help you determine what groups need to be there at this particular time for any content area. Being alert to changes and then changing appropriately serves you well in a differentiated classroom.
And how about when students finish at different times? What can we do about that? Well, I think the answer to that would be anchor activities, where you have something substantial, and this isn't a puzzle corner or something like that, but it's some sort of ongoing learning experience that when children finish earlier, they know where they're supposed to go. Perhaps it's a file cabinet. It could be just different things sort of set up so that they know where to go when they finish at different times. Another thing that would help with that is for the kids to have an agenda for the day's learning so that they know, okay, when I finish this, I go on to the next thing. And when it's written and it's put in multiple places, it just makes it a lot easier for children to know what they're supposed to do.
That could be called a menu, could be an agenda. It could be something that children have individually, or it could be that they know where to go in the room to find those particular directions.
So how do you monitor progress?
You assess.
That's that formative assessment she was talking about before, and you use that to alter the day-to-day teachings that you're doing with the kids. Now, you're better off to have written records of that. If you do a pre-assessment, it needs to be written. It needs to be individualized so that you know where that individual child starts and the progress that is being made, hopefully daily.
And when it's in writing, it's a wonderful way to communicate progress to the child. But it also offers that opportunity to keep parents up to date on learning. And so when we talk about progress, we're talking about learning progress.
Exactly.
That's what a differentiated classroom is all about, learning.
The Beasley resource that you have access to that we mentioned earlier is wonderful when it comes to very specific strategies on how to manage classrooms. This is just a sample that you have access to. For example, look at the giving directions for group work. I know that's small. It'll be bigger when you access it. But, you know, if the whole class is doing the same activity, then give the directions to the whole class. Don't give multiple task directions to the whole class. Some common sense kind of things, but when you think about it, it will make your life much easier in a differentiated classroom.
It's that planning. It's that preparation. It's that structure within the classroom.
And the key to that structure is that you're practicing the procedures and routines early in the school year, and you're doing it pretty often, too.
You want it to be the routines to be so routine that everyone can do it almost without thinking about it.
Yes. So remember, we're walking through that differentiated classroom, and although it appears a little disorganized and maybe a little noisy, there is a strong structure underneath it. What else are you going to see?
You're going to see lots of different resources that have a range of lexile and reading levels. If you have a heterogeneous classroom, you probably have students that are reading several grade levels below as well as several grade levels above, and it's hard to maintain your interest in reading if it isn't a pretty good match to your level of reading.
You're also going to see that the whole class is working on one concept. They're discovering aspects of one concept, but they're doing it via different learning perspectives and learning experiences. So we might all be talking about character analysis in a short story, but we may be approaching it on varying levels of complexity. By creating different products, we could be doing a variety of different things.
And even reading different short stories.
Sure, definitely.
You have a variety of products both on display and being created throughout the classroom. Remember, a product is the way that students show what they have learned. It is that demonstration. And so we highlight student products that probably are not cookie-cutter products, but they really are real, authentic products that demonstrate the learning.
And just throwing this in here, they need to be held to high standards, especially with some gifted children who could whip out something on the bus, and it might be better than what someone else works for several days on. So, and there are lots of resources out there that can help with products, but making sure that the child has a guide to go along with, perhaps that's built into a rubric to help them as they create the product.
students have access to anchor activities, whether it's a physical or electronic place to find them. You talked about that a little bit, Tracy, but this is such an important point. What are you going to do when you have really completed what has been assigned thus far, and that is what your anchor activities will allow you to do, not just to utilize time with busy work, but it's an opportunity to extend learning, which is what this is all about.
Definitely. We've also talked about the formative assessment, but when you walk through a differentiated classroom, you're going to see formative assessment ongoing. And of course, this does include the pre-assessment.
And everyone is engaged in learning. And let's go back to the idea that everyone has respectful tasks. It's only when everyone has respectful tasks that we really are engaged in learning. We're not just doing schoolwork, but we're actively engaged in learning. Oh my, is that ever an important part of a differentiated classroom, because that's when children are motivated to learn and to do more than work for the A or the minimum.
I couldn't agree more, and I also want to point out, too, that that actively engaged, that's the mind engaged, not just those hands being busy, but we want that intellectual engagement. And realize that a lot of different learning experiences can be going on. It might be whole group. There are many times that whole group is the right way to go. It might be small groups. It might be individualized. But it's never going to be one of those things all the time. Those are some of the things that you're going to see as you walk through. Now let's look at what are some of those things that kids experience in a classroom that's differentiated.
Well, in the first place, they will see everyone learning. That's what school is all about. Parents have every right to ask the teacher, what evidence do you have that my child is making continuous progress? And that's in all of their content areas. If a child comes to school performing 2 or 3 grade levels ahead of age mates, then they ought to still be making continuous progress. It isn't that children go to school just to learn 3rd grade work. They go to school to learn. And if they're in a 3rd grade classroom, they still need to be making continuous progress.
Without a doubt. And, I think I'm going to throw in here, too, that when you have a gifted child tutoring another child who doesn't get it all the time, that the gifted child's not going to be making continuous progress. So that's our goal, that everybody's learning. And this helps form a community of learners. Think about those small groups. You've got a teacher working with one of the small groups. Another group has questions. What do they do? Well, it's part of your organizational structure that they're going to talk among themselves to figure out if they know the answer. And that helps build that community. And if they don't know the answer, then maybe they'll put up the red cup or whatever they need to do to signal to you as an educator that they need help. But everyone is helping everyone else learn. And in a differentiated classroom, the students realize that they're all different kinds of learners, that they have different learning styles, different learning profiles, different interests and abilities, and again, that helps create that community.
And that's never been a secret in the class.
No.
Children have real good idea of who's the most advanced in math. It's not a surprise. We're not trying to cover that up. So what we need to do is appreciate each other and know that if each is to learn, it will be a different starting.
Definitely, I agree. And we've talked about this several times, the minds-on learning that may also have hands-on.
And everyone must be learning something that's appropriately challenging.
And how do you figure out what's appropriate?
You assess.
You pre-assess. Yep, you sure do. Learning experiences typically center on a concept or topic, and the whole class is learning about that concept, but they're doing it in very different ways, different perspectives that are based on different interests and readiness levels.
But when it comes to discussion, they can all discuss that concept or topic, no matter which learning experience they have been engaged in.
And that's one of the things that helps build that community of learners where they respect each other. Regardless of ability level, they've learned to appreciate other people's insights.
Absolutely. And we certainly want to stretch students to learn at higher levels. And that becomes part of the experience that helps students learn to take a risk, to take on a learning experience that they may even think is too tough for them to achieve, but they work on it very hard, and they reach that goal, and my goodness, isn't that a wonderful feeling when you have mastered something you wondered if you could.
And that certainly goes along with the whole growth mindset that Carol Dweck talks about. It's that risk-taking, feeling comfortable to do that because that's how you grow and learn. And we've mentioned respectful learning experiences.
My, is that important. And over again, you cannot give worksheets to some kids and have others actively engaged in other hands-on, minds-on experiences. At least it's got to be a balance.
I agree. And students will be experiencing opportunities that allow them to use their strengths, that allows them to focus on their interest in both learning and in demonstrating that learning. So it is strength-based instruction, strength-based learning, instead of looking at deficiencies.
And of course, always people aren't going to be working in their area of strength, but they need to be doing that a lot of the time, because if you link strength and interest with a learning experience, my goodness, the buy-in is tremendous.
Without a doubt. So let's look, how do traditional classrooms differ from differentiated classrooms? What do they look like? Well, in a traditional classroom, you're going to have a pre-fixed physical environment, whether that's straight rows or little circles. They're pretty much going to stay where they are. Not so in a differentiated classroom. It's going to be a pretty flexible environment. There may be charts and posters on the walls that show all the different configurations for different individualized learning and group learning.
Grade level resources are really what you find in many traditional classrooms. Grade level work, while in a differentiated classroom there should be a variety of resources that are at levels both below the grade level and above the grade level.
In a traditional classroom, most of the kids are going to be doing the exact same assignments, having the exact same amount of time to get those assignments completed. In the differentiated classrooms, you are going to have varying assignments that take pace into consideration.
A teacher-led classroom is most likely what you see in a traditional classroom, where in a differentiated classroom, the teacher is the facilitator or coach.
In a traditional classroom, you're doing grade level work, so we're all going to start at the exact same place. In a differentiated classroom, we take into consideration that the children come in with a variety of experiences, a variety of content knowledge and skills they've mastered, so PreAssessment will help us make that match.
The summative or end assessment will be the same in a traditional classroom, most likely, where in a differentiated classroom, the assessments vary because the learning experiences have varied, and we want to make sure that the assessments are matched to what the students have been learning.
Quite a difference in those complexions, aren't there? So, to differentiate or not to differentiate? Well, there are quite a few reasons why teachers just don't do it. One reason is just basic lack of time. It takes too much time to come up with different assignments, to find the varying levels of resources and all those sorts of things.
Limited resources.
The whole management thing, how do I, all those questions that we talked about organizationally, teachers just don't have time or effort or initiative to deal with that.
Or they tried it once and felt burned.
Exactly.
By management issues. We don't have lots of opportunities for students to have, or teachers to have experienced differentiation. lack of training, lack of role models in both the learning strategies and the classroom environment.
And then realistically, we have that nation and statewide emphasis on content mastery for state assessments.
We've heard a lot about proficiency.
We certainly have, to the detriment of many of our gifted children. And, you know, there are a lot of schools out there that have PACE guides, and on this day, everybody's covering this material, and on the next day, we're all covering this. And those are just real-world type of things. But there are ways to differentiate taking those into consideration. But if you look at this list, you can see why teachers don't differentiate.
That's not very encouraging, though, Tracy.
No.
But let's look at reasons why teachers do differentiate.
Yes.
Because children are different. Oh, my, isn't that wonderful?
And continuous progress is the reason they're going to school. Not to do 5th grade level math during the 4th grade, 5th grade, and 6th grade, the same assignments. We need continuous progress, and we need a year's growth at least. And for many gifted children, that's the minimum. Some could even have more than a year's growth if they're provided with the right experiences.
It's motivating to learners when they have opportunities to work at the level that matches their readiness to learn in a particular content area, their interest in that content area.
And that appropriately challenging material we've talked about encourages a wide development of life skills, or a deep development of life skills. So if you have challenging material and you just don't sit down and whip it out, you've got to organize your time. You've got to figure out, how do I go about researching this? It's risk-taking. It's taking responsibility for my own performance. It's work ethic. Gosh, I'm going to have to work hard if I'm going to get an A on this test. And those are the life skills that are so important for success.
Metacognition and lifelong learning are so important to us. And if you look at the new standards, it certainly speaks to thinking and lifelong learning skills. Those will only occur if we're differentiating. The one-size-fits-all curriculum does not encourage either of those.
Those are extremely important reasons as you look through that. Why should teachers differentiate? Very powerful. And I also want you to notice, look at the focus behind those reasons. The reasons why teachers don't differentiate, the reasons for teachers to differentiate are all student-based. Remember those lifelong skills that they have, motivation, it's because kids are different and the kids need continuous progress. But the reasons why we don't differentiate are teacher-based.
It's interesting to me, I got a letter today, and the letterhead said, it's all about kids.
If only.
And so many mission statements for the schools are all about developing potential. Those are the things that we need to talk about as faculties.
Yes.
In order to say, okay, if that's true, what are the implications for learning? And it really takes you to differentiated classrooms that have a climate established in which all children will be learning every day, and differentiation is the only way to see that we have lifelong learners who are being created every day they're in school.
So it boils down to, what are the necessary elements of an effectively differentiated classroom? You have a handout that's an effective differentiated model that's over there on your links. And just want to kind of talk about this as a whole as we're kind of putting the pieces together. And if you'll notice, there are multiple concepts here. The light gray circle that goes all the way around is classroom climate. And that's what we've been talking about tonight. A climate and culture of the classroom has to take all of these different concepts into account. Diversity, challenge, risk-taking. We've talked about all of these throughout the evening. And the book that can go along with this that you get the discount on certainly discusses each of these in a little bit more detail. But in order to have an effectively differentiated classroom, bottom line, the climate and culture have to be conducive to that.
And they must be in place as you implement strategies.
without a doubt. If you'll notice on the effective differentiation model in the center are learner outcomes. This is the goal. We want kids to be learning. And in order for children to have learning experiences, you have to ask these three questions.
And the first one is your planning question. What do I want students to know, understand, or be able to do? And it is only when you have planned that you can move to the pre-assessment question, who already knows and understands the information and or can do it. Who needs additional support in order to know, understand, or demonstrate the skills? It works, those questions with pre-assessment work with the children who need more basic information and those who need more complex information and process skills. That's your pre-assessment piece. And only then can you really ask that question for differentiation. What can I do for him, her, or them so they can make continuous progress and extend their learning? All effective differentiation has to be built on these three questions.
Go back and look at the model. You've got some triangles that go out, and you're looking at different instructional dimensions. Basically, 4 different ways that teachers can differentiate. They can differentiate content. What do they want the students to know? Process. Now notice this isn't what the kids are doing hands-on, but what do you want the students to do cognitively with what they know? You can also differentiate product. That's how students demonstrate their learning. And you can also differentiate assessment. How do you assess what has been learned? And the last part is the differentiation strategies. What are some of the techniques that you can use, strategies that you can use to make differentiation real in your classroom? And of course, we're going to talk quite a bit more about that next week. So if you look at that model, I hope that you can take some of the things that we've talked about tonight and see where they are placed into that model, because this is what it's all about. It's many components. It's very intentional planning. It's taking students' best interests in mind.
And you note that the effective differentiation model is intended to support continuous and lifelong learning. That's really what school is all about.
What questions do you guys have for us?
Well, Tracy, as we look on here, I see that Marilyn is asking, they said that they've seen folders, and that a lot of times those anchor folders have word searches or something like that in them, and they'd really like to know what would be an example of something meaningful and appropriate as an anchor activity. What are the characteristics of a good anchor activity?
Well, I think a word search probably isn't one of the ones that we would choose. It probably would be a higher level thinking learning experience that would extend what the students already know and would challenge them to think about it at a higher level. It actually is exactly what we're going to be doing next week with this session, but it is taking whatever you're doing in class and bumping it up so that they're thinking about it at a challenging level, that they're not just answering questions like filling words in for a word search, but they're doing higher level thinking that will require them to look at the content perhaps from multiple perspectives and to think about it in a way that no book has explained it to them. It will be a task they have to think about in order to complete.
But it also needs to have pretty strict guidelines with it so that they can see, okay, what is my product supposed to be as I do this? So you might have a rubric that goes along with that.
Oh, I think you would.
Yes. And realize there are a lot of great resources out there. For example, Ingenuity, they create products based on Bloom's taxonomy. Lots of high-level questions about certain topics are ready for you just to use pretty easily. And as Julia mentioned, not to put it off until next week, but we are going to talk about some specific things such as those anchor activities.
Well, great. We've got one more question. Sherilyn kind of wants to know, just as a place to start for teachers who are just beginning or who are pre-service, how can she present differentiation as a simple paradigm?
Well, I think those three questions that we we have shared with you, the planning question, the pre-assessment question, and the differentiation question provide a great starting place. I find that pre-assessment is the most illuminating activity for teachers because until you pre-assess, so many teachers assume that how well the students do on the summative assessment is the result of what they've taught them. And pre-assessment opens that wide up, and you find that often many students already knew a lot of that before you taught the unit.
And I would go a step further with that, and this has been pretty effective, is you take that pre-assessment and you show a student example, and then you say, okay, what can we do for this child? And you start brainstorming all these different concepts. And we use something called a TWH chart. It's a variation of KWL. The T is what do you think about the topic. The W is what do you already know about it, or excuse me, what do you want to learn about it. And then the H part is how do you want to learn about it. So basically, if you've got a child who fills in a lot of that thinking about it, that they know quite a bit about it, you can focus on that middle column. What do they want to learn about? And then just take that as a brainstorming for the class as you come up with, a half dozen activities that this child could engage in, learning experiences, so that that child would have continuous progress.
And if you have that many, then the child also has a choice of which one or ones of those that he or she would do.
Definitely.
And that choice is a match with where the child is in terms of interest and content.
Well, thank you so much, ladies. We're just a little over time tonight, but I really thought it would be good for us to run just a smidge over since we were just a smidge late getting started. But I hope that everyone out there will please join me in thanking Julia and Tracy for sharing their expertise with our members and enlightening us to some new possibilities. We also hope that you will join us next Wednesday, April 24th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time when Julia and Tracy will continue the conversation with Differentiation Toolkit, Simple Strategies at Work. Please take a moment to fill out the online evaluation located in the links box. Please give us your feedback so that we can continue to wow you with these online sessions. And on behalf of NAGC, thank you to everyone and for everything that you do to support gifted and talented learners. Please have a good evening, and now you may disconnect.